so now let's take a look at lipids. Now, lipids are a group of molecules that are nonpolar, meaning that they don't dissolve in water. All right, and so the first group that I'm going to talk about are triglycerides, and this is what triglycerides look like. They have a glycerol and 3 fatty acids. Now, triglycerides are commonly known as fats and oils. Now, fats are solids at room temperature, and oils are liquids at room temperature. So, with this, the only difference between a fat and an oil has to do with their fatty acid chains, and I'm not going to get into all that right now. But the thing about fat is used by animals for long-term energy storage. And here's the reason why. So 1 gram of fat contains 9 calories of energy, versus 1 gram of a carbohydrate only contains 4 calories of energy. So what that means then is that we can store more than twice the amount of energy in the same amount of space. And so that's why we use fats for long-term energy storage. So just also let you know, 1 gram of a protein is equal to 4 calories, and 1 gram of alcohol is worth 7 calories. Okay, let's look at other lipids. Next are phospholipids. I just want to bring these guys up. We're going to talk about them much more in the next chapter, but these are the main component of membrane. So phospholipids are the main component of membrane. And as I said, we'll talk about these guys some more later on. These are all steroids. All right, so a steroid is a molecule that has this 4-ring structure. And so you can see this is cholesterol, this is estrogen, testosterone, bile salts, even vitamin D is a steroid. So we take in cholesterol and we can make these other stuff out of it. So I know a lot of people, when they hear steroids, they think of anabolic steroids. Now, anabolic steroids have similar shape as testosterone, and so because of that, because they have a similar shape as testosterone, they have similar functions in our body, okay? So what I'm trying to tell you here is that a molecule's shape determines its function. And so that's going to be very important here. So we're going to move on to proteins. Now, proteins are large molecules composed of amino acids. And there are 20 amino acids that make up all the proteins of life. This is the general structure of those 20 amino acids. They all have this is the same, this R group can be different, all right? So, and so this is just showing 3 different amino acids here. Now, so proteins can have many different functions in our body. They can be hormones, they can be structural proteins like collagen. Collagen makes up the whites of your eyes, your tendons, your ligaments. Keratin is the protein that's found in your skin cells, your nails, and your hair, okay? They can also be transport. They help move stuff through membranes. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But one particular group that's very important are enzymes. And an enzyme is an organic catalyst. And what it does is it increases the rate of chemical reactions without cells being changed, okay? So it's going to cause this reaction to occur, and as you can see at the beginning, at the end, it looks exactly the same. Okay? So for just about every reaction that occurs in our body, there is an enzyme that's in control of that reaction. And so, as I mentioned before, the reason we can't break down cellulose is we don't make the enzyme to break it down. All right? People who are lactose intolerant don't produce the enzyme lactase to break down that sugar, all right? So, enzymes are very important. Now, proteins have a complex structure to them. So, it's not just a bunch of amino acids together in a chain, they also form these 3-dimensional shapes. Now, these 3-dimensional shapes can be broken. And so, when you break these 3-dimensional shapes, this is known as denaturing. So, that's to change the shape of a protein. And as I mentioned before, if we change the shape of a protein, it loses its function, okay? So what can change the shape of a protein? There's a few things. High heat can change the shape of a protein. You've all experienced this if you've ever cooked an egg. If you crack an egg on a skillet, you have this clear gelatinous stuff, and that's called ovoalbumin. What happens after you heat it up is that ovoalbumin solidifies, and it changes its color, becomes white. And so those are changes, that's a denaturing of the ovoalbumin. Lobsters are typically a greenish to bluish brown color, After you cook them, they turn a nice bright red color. That's a denaturing of the proteins in its exoskeleton. The curdling of milk is caused by pH changes from bacteria feeding upon the milk and producing lactic acid as a byproduct of their feeding action. All right? Salinity changes, as I mentioned, pH changes, alcohol, these are all things that can cause proteins to denature. All right, let's move on to our last group of organic molecules, and these are nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are large molecules composed of nucleotides. And a nucleotide is made of 3 parts. So these 3 parts are one nucleotide. And so there are 3 molecules we're going to mention here. One is DNA, which you see here. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and that is our genetic material. The next is RNA. I don't think I have a picture of RNA. I don't. RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. So what RNA does is it makes proteins from the information that's on DNA. Now, if you remember, ribosomes make proteins. So ribosomes are primarily made of RNA. All right, so the last one I'm going to mention here is ATP. So ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. And what ATP is, it's the energy currency of the cell. All right, so what we do, so this is ATP, so adenosine, adenine, so with this ribose sugar, that's adenosine, and then 3 phosphate groups. And you're seeing these squiggly lines. So the squiggly lines indicate a high energy bond. So when we do anything that requires energy in us, what we do is we break one of these high energy bonds. It releases energy to do whatever it is we need that energy for. Move molecules through membranes, cause muscle contractions, stuff like that, build molecules, break them down, or whatnot. So if we take ATP, we break one of these bonds, we make ADP, so adenosine diphosphate. We can also break this one down, and that would create a MP, adenosine monophosphate. So, okay. All right. So this is just trying to show that a little bit. All right. So the last part of this chapter is actually in a different chapter I like to talk about here, though, and that's cellular respiration. These are the biochemical reactions that extract energy from molecules. And there's 2 ways in which we extract energy from molecules. One is with oxygen, and one is without. So the first is called aerobic respiration. So aerobic respiration uses oxygen. Aero refers to oxygen. So this is a breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen to produce energy. So aerobic respiration occurs in the mitochondria. And so this is why we call the mitochondria the powerhouses of the cell, because they're going to produce that ATP. So here, we're going to use oxygen to help us break down glucose, and we're going to make energy. And this is going to produce anywhere from 32 to 34 ATP from one glucose molecule through aerobic respiration. The byproducts of this are carbon dioxide and water. So the water we can keep, the carbon dioxide, obviously, we exhale. Now, I've just told you right now why we breathe. As long as our cells are alive, they're going to have a constant energy demand. If they have a constant energy demand, they're going to constantly need to break down glucose to supply that energy, and we need oxygen to help us break down that glucose. So that's why we have to take in oxygen, and that's why we exhale carbon dioxide. The other form of respiration is anaerobic respiration. So an means without, so this is without oxygen. So this is an incomplete breakdown of glucose without oxygen to produce energy. This occurs in the cytoplasm, so not within the mitochondria, and it produces a lot less energy. One glucose is only going to make 2 ATP, so a lot less energy. So we've got to break down a lot more glucose in order to get the same amount of energy. And the byproduct is lactic acid. And lactic acid, it will cause our muscles to fatigue. So this is kind of the counterintuitive thing. So when we're doing rigorous exercise, so like sprinting, lifting weights, whenever we contract those muscles, we're actually going to pinch the blood vessels that are going to deliver oxygen to those muscle cells. So it's counterintuitive there. So the stronger we contract those muscles, the less oxygen those muscle cells will get. And so we have to switch from doing aerobic respiration in those muscles to anaerobic respiration in those muscles. So what's going to happen though is if we continue to do anaerobic respiration, lactic acid will build up and we can't contract those muscles anymore. We have to wait for the lactic acid to diffuse out of those muscle cells before we can contract them again.